welcome, Karran, to Sydney, to New South Wales Teachers Federation. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and talk to us about charter schools. Could you tell me what charter schools are?
Charter schools are public schools operated by a private nonprofit board, and in some places they're operated by a for-profit corporation. But most of the ones in New Orleans are with nonprofit corporations with self-selected boards of directors. Parents or citizens, taxpayers, we don't get to vote on who sits on these boards. So you basically have a public school at public expense operated by a private entity. And the schools don't really have any special curriculum that makes them better. They have more autonomy to do what they want to do in the classroom, but that doesn't necessarily make it a better fit for children. Some of the charter schools have special focuses. The school my son attends is an arts-based charter school, but most of the charter schools that are operating in New Orleans have a college prep focus, but it's mostly, I call them schools that are just test prep factories because they put a lot of emphasis on passing the test. Charter schools are very concerned about making sure they meet their academic goals, and those goals are based on certain scores on a test. So instead of looking at children and creating an educational program that's well-rounded, it's focused on what is on the test.
Do they, in any way, enhance disadvantaged communities?
I don't believe charter schools enhance disadvantaged communities at all. I think charter schools are very much predatory on disadvantaged communities because most of the time we're talking about communities of color, yes, communities where the overwhelming majority of the children are living in poverty. And for these children, the regular school system had not served them well. So that leaves those parents open to hear of new concepts and hoping to believe that those new concepts will work for their children. Those parents are easy prey to anyone coming to town wanting to sell their charter school wares. And parents are, they want what's best for their kids, and they think that this charter school is going to be a better concept. And here we are 7 years after Hurricane Katrina with all of these charter schools in New Orleans. I can tell you that it's not necessarily better just because it's a charter school. There are good schools and there are bad schools. There are good charter schools, but when you look at why those charter schools are good, you find that they have in some way manipulated their enrollment, either on the front end by having selective admissions criteria, or on the back end by having behavior policies that would cause the most difficult children to eventually leave the school. So when somebody says, well, that's a good school, you really have to pull back the layers to see why it's called a good school. Now, there are many charter schools that are not good at all. In fact, in the United States, there has been some research by Stanford University that shows that only 17% of the charter schools have been identified as being better than traditional public schools, but 37% have been identified as being worse than traditional public schools, while the remainder are no worse, no better. And people might say, well, what's wrong? So if they're not any worse or any better, why not just try it out? That's what they say. Oh, we could just have that as an option. But the problem is that in areas where the public has a lot of input through electing board members, why would you take away your democratic control of your public school system to try out something that has in many cases been found to be a detriment, has been found to be harmful, not good? Why would you take away your right to have an involvement in your schools if it's no better or no worse? These are children's lives. We shouldn't be experimenting with children like this. If we are having problems with how some of our schools serve some of our children, our time, efforts, and money would be better spent exploring how to make that better. I'm not saying that all of our schools are perfect and perfect for every child. But we know that poverty does matter. We know that some of our schools that serve our most impoverished children don't have the resources that they need. We know that they need sometimes more resources than a school that doesn't have that kind of a population. Our time would be better spent figuring out ways to get our kids the resources that they need.
And could you give us a picture of Hurricane Katrina and the effects and what happened afterwards?
After Hurricane Katrina, when we were able to come back into the city, none of the schools were open initially. And the state of Louisiana, once they took that 107 of 128 schools from our local elected board fired all of the teachers who were on payroll. Over 7,500 teachers and support staff workers lost their jobs. So not only did they lose their homes in the hurricane, they lost their careers. Many of them ended up teaching and working in other states until this day. Many of those who came back and tried to get jobs with the Recovery School District were told that they had to take a proficiency test before they can be placed into the classroom. Now, these are teachers who were already certified, teachers who had many, many years of experience. They were being told that they had to take a proficiency test to go into the Recovery School District schools. Now, mind you, when we brought in all of these Teach for America teachers, they didn't have to take a proficiency test. They were given housing allowances and bonuses to come in and work in New Orleans, but the existing teachers had to take a proficiency test. That's not right. Children looked for what was familiar when they came back. So now their schools were gone, their favorite teachers were gone. Our lives were just devastated after Katrina. It was, I call it the disaster after the disaster. The changes made in our public school system post-Katrina was another disaster.
Who benefits from charter schools?
I think that there are many entities who are promoting charter schools as a business that benefit from charter schools. I believe that there are many politicians who benefit from charter schools because basically they're selling our kids to the highest bidder, to the charter company that comes in and makes the best promises, even though the evidence shows that those are promises that are often not kept. But the politicians benefit politically from making the deal to let charter schools in. I don't believe our communities benefit at all from charter schools.
How does the organisation that you work with mobilise parents?
Well, I'm a part of an organization called Parents Across America. I'm a founding member. We've been in operation now for 2 years. It's a nonprofit, all-volunteer organization, and we literally come from every corner of America. And we mostly communicate through the internet. We write papers, taking positions on various issues around the changes that are being made in public education, charter schools being one of those changes. There are many other changes that are being made in public education that we have positions on. And we do not support the expansion of charter schools because we do see that expanding charter schools takes away parent and community control of their own destiny. Our organization, it's constantly changing, so I can't say just how many chapters we have throughout the country, but we have many, many chapters and affiliates throughout the country. A lot of times we are working with our state legislatures, we're working with our school boards, making sure that there is a parent voice in public education policy making.
What does the educational curriculum look like in charter schools?
Well, the educational curriculum in charter schools is different for every school. There's no set curriculum for any one school. It's constantly changing based on what's on the test. As the tests change, schools change their curriculum. Some schools have certain offerings around the arts or science, but in general, there's no set curriculum. That's why it's very difficult to say, because of this curriculum, students learn better. There is no set curriculum.
What are the conditions for teachers in charter schools, and are teachers qualified in charter school?
In the state of Louisiana, teachers do not have to be certified to teach in a charter school. Different places call it different things, qualified, certified, or registered, but basically you don't have to have a degree in education to teach in a charter school. And I always find that very interesting. Would you want a doctor who doesn't have a degree in medicine to perform surgery on you? Would you want an attorney who doesn't have a degree in law to file a lawsuit for you? Teaching is a profession. Why would we want people who don't have degrees in education to teach our children? Many of the charter schools in the United States operate with what's called Teach for America teachers. My son calls them amateur teachers. These are recent college graduates, often very young, 23, 25, 27-year-old young people who may have a degree in business or finance or history, and they come into our schools to teach our most challenged children. It makes no sense to me to give the children who have already been identified as having the most academic challenges amateur teachers. I would think you would want to give those students the most experienced teachers. But we have schools that are set up with 80 and 90, sometimes 100% Teach for America teachers. I don't understand how anybody thinks that would be better.
Do you work alongside in collaboration with other teacher organisations?
I am in several coalitions where teacher organizations are also a part of the coalition, so are community organizations. It's important that parents and teachers and teacher organizations work together to find what works best for our kids. We are the people who are the closest to our children, and it's important that we have a very good working relationship to make sure that any policy changes that are coming down take into account our children's best interests. I work at every level, local, state, and nationally with teacher organizations because it's best that parents and teachers work together.
What advice would you give to parents about charter schools?
Well, as a public school parent, when I came back from Hurricane Katrina and my son's school had been converted to a charter school, I felt that my rights had been taken away because now the school no longer had the oversight of a central office. They had autonomy to do what they wanted to do. And one of the things that really frustrated me, my son attended this same school before Hurricane Katrina, but when we came back and I was inquiring about transportation, the school leader, I don't call her a principal because they changed their names. She's the CEO, the chief executive officer of the school. She was the principal before. She said, well, we're a charter school now. We don't have to provide transportation. And I thought, well, how is this better? That you would take away transportation for getting my child to school. So that was my first experience with this not necessarily being better. At this school, if my son doesn't keep a 2.0 grade point average on a 4-point scale, they can disenroll him, and he would have to find another school to attend the next school year. And I thought, well, that's not really student-friendly or parent-friendly. So my experience with charter schools is not favorable, but also from the perspective of many of the parents I work with, many parents find that they have to go from school to school to school because charter school leaders are fond of saying, well, in New Orleans you have school choice. If you don't like the way we do things here, you can choose another school. I don't think that's the way school choice is supposed to work. But charter schools are sold to us as parents as this opportunity to have more choices. But it seems to me that schools do more of the choosing. And as parents, and our kids lose when schools do the choosing. Schools do the choosing when they have selective admissions policies. Schools do the choosing when they have selective retention policies through their behavior policies, and they put children out who don't behave well or cause so much anguish in parents that parents choose to move their kids because they're being harassed by the school all the time. So that school choice is more about schools choosing. It's not about parents choosing. What I would say is that charter schools is one tool in what is being called education reform. I don't call it education reform. I call it education deform. All change in public education is not good change. And these changes are deforming public education, not necessarily improving public education. So this is the education deform movement.
Thank you so much for taking the time to come here and be with us and tell us from your point of view as a parent about charter schools.
Thank you for having me.